Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound Radio Show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm your host, Robert Winfrey, and, I like this show. I do. I complain every now and then because the sport annoys me from time to time, but I like the show. And tonight we are previewing a show that, a UFC event that I think looks like just terrible. I cannot find anything on this show that I'm even remotely excited about. The main card has 3 light heavyweight fights. I mean, I don't know what the good people of Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada did to deserve this, but this is not a good card. This is really not a good card. So we'll be previewing that, and then since we had a week off, there were some news announcements. A couple of new fights got announced. There was some stuff involving John Jones. On the positive side this time, for once, there's Khabib Nurmagomedov drama because
Fights got canceled.
Fights got canceled. Such is the nature of things, and we'll be going over all of it because that's what we do here. You just heard him there. Here with me, as usual, the 411 Jack of all trades, because he's in all the zones, folks. Jeff Harris. Jeff, how are you this evening?
I like this show, Robert Winfrey, and I like you. I'm Jeffrey Harris.
I believe exactly half of that.
And you want to know what else? The Astros may not be going to the World Series this year, but I'm very proud of the team and what they've accomplished. To the LA Dodgers organization and the LA Dodger fans, congratulations. You got a lucky break this season. You'll be going into the World Seasons not haunted by the fact that you were defeated on your own turf by the Houston Astros, redubbing the city of LA to Los Astros. But that's okay. It's okay because Houston is a world championship city, and the Houston Astros are still a world championship team. So, thank you, Astros.
Yeah, you guys had a good run this year. I mean, look,
we did have a good run. We did have a good run. It just wasn't good enough.
Hey, the only sports team in my immediate vicinity is the Utah Jazz, and I'm not even sure they're still a thing in the NBA.
Well, I mean, look at the Milwaukee Brewers. They're the favorite right now. Whoever thought that was possible, you know?
Sports are cyclical, generally speaking, like that. It's a good thing. All right.
Let me see. I'm trying to. I just want to look it up. Have they ever?
I believe they have in the past, probably before they moved to Milwaukee, because didn't they used to be in a different city? That organization.
Yeah. Okay. So the Brewers have no World Series, and they only have one and their only previous pennant, I think, was 1982. So
that's before I was born.
So that's pretty, So it takes time. It takes time for. So when you have a team, sometimes it can take a year, it can take lifetimes, Robert, lifetimes.
More than lifetimes in some cases.
I mean, look, the Cubs. It took the Cubs over how many
100 years?
Over 100 years. So, and it took the Astros 55 years to win a World Series. So, yeah. As you said, it can take more than a lifetime, especially in baseball. So there you go.
All right.
Ready to get into it.
Good way to start the MMA show, talking about baseball. All right.
UFC Fight Night, Moncton.
UFC Fight Night 138 from Moncton.
There's some good stuff on this card.
You're going to have to try and sell me on this, because I got nothing.
I mean...
I don't hate the main event.
Oh, wait. Artem Lobov.
I'm going to put it like this. I hate the main event.
Patrick Cummins was still in the UFC.
This card is full of people who I looked at that and went, wait, they still have a job. Anyway, the main event, the best fight on the card.
Who became a crybaby after UFC took him out of his job being a Starbucks barista and gave him a huge payday.
To get smoked by Daniel Cormier and then
revel in mediocrity. Yeah, and then they gave, I would say it's pretty gracious they've kept him on as long as they have, considering he was brought in to essentially lose to Daniel Cormier.
He's had a couple of rough runs, man.
All right, you cannot deny that Anthony Smith Ozdemir is a valid fight right now.
That's a very. I said I don't hate the main event. I don't even hate the main event in the main event. This is clearly. I mean, look. I live in Utah. I live about an hour outside of Salt Lake, give or take.
Right.
We don't get big events. We've had one UFC event ever.
What about Omaha, Nebraska? Why? I mean, you know,
hang on. Here's my point.
This is like filet mignon for Omaha.
Here's my point. Smaller markets, places they don't go to all the time, they're not going to get,
Oh, this
big
is in
cards.
New Brunswick.
Yeah, they're in Canada for this.
Right. So I mean we're like, is Moncton, New Brunswick, is that, how big is this city? Like, what do they have going on over there in Moncton?
Let's have a look.
They have an NHL team?
I don't know. They have oh, this is going to be on Atlantic time. Oh, that's going to suck.
They have the Moncton Wildcats.
It's not the biggest city in the world, but you don't need to. You don't necessarily need the biggest.
No, that's a junior ice hockey.
Hey, look again. Like,
no,
come on.
Why don't
a big
you
city? But
why don't you, the city's getting a UFC event? You should. That's going to be on TV. I mean, like, this is huge for Moncton. This is probably one of the biggest things they've got going on.
Yeah,
you know?
I imagine. But my point is, if you're going to a smaller market area like this,
Ed Herman is still on the roster.
Hang on.
Ed Herman.
Hang on. Believe me, I know. Having a fight like Ozdemir and Smith, which is not quite a number one contenders fight, but someone certainly in the title picture, easily. The winner is certainly in the picture. That's a solid main event, all things considered, for this type of fight night. This is just a badly constructed card.
Normally it would be a solid undercard fight. I would agree with that.
And I mean, again, there are certain markets that draw more prestige, even if they're, fight night cards. This isn't one of them. Again, there's tiers of cards. We all know this. We all accept this. In this instance, this is a perfectly serviceable main event. I have no problems with that. It's really the rest of this card that I just look at and go,
Anthony Smith
why?
He's gotten a second wind on his career, and he's this is like the most relevant he's ever been, considering he was pretty much like just a guy in Strikeforce, they carried over, and now he's headlining UFC show.
Yeah.
I'm happy for the guy, honestly, but
I am too, and I'm interested in this fight simply because he's vaulted into a title, not exactly the title, but into a top contender's position off the back of 2 wins over, much as I love Shogun, in 2018 he's a has-been.
Honestly, though, I don't think he beats Ozdemir.
This is a tough one. This is going to be his real acid test in the division, and I'm curious about it for that reason, because Ozdemir came into the UFC.
And Ozdemir can be very inconsistent. I don't think we can overlook that.
No, if he doesn't get you out of there fast, based on all available evidence, mind you, if he doesn't get you out of there fast, it can be things can go bad for him.
The reason I was sour on him at first is because, let's be honest, that Ovince St. Preux fight to me was one of the worst fights of the year.
It was not good. It was really not good.
And quite frankly, I didn't even feel... Do you feel he even decisively won that fight?
I scored it for him, but...
To me, it was like he... I'm fine with that, but it was like he barely edged that out.
Yeah. It was a late notice thing. It wasn't a great fight. The fact that he came off of that and then, knocked out 2 rising contenders in a grand total of, a minute and 10 seconds?
Right.
And the division being crap led to him getting a shot at Daniel Cormier and getting obliterated because he's nowhere near the level of DC.
Right. But, I'm still not sure. Light heavyweight being what it is now, I'm not sure how... I feel like Anthony Smith has been able to do well lately because of just light heavyweight being what it is at the moment, and
Some of it's that, some of it's the opposition. I mean, he debuted in the division in the UFC against Rashad Evans, and Evans is not at all. I mean, look,
right,
Rashad had at one point in time a really great career, and
right.
in totality, his career is still very, very good. In 2017, 2018,
He beat a 39-year-old declining past his prime Rashad Evans,
and then he beat a beat
broken
Shogun.
down Shogun. Who was Shogun still on his winning streak at that point? Yes, he was.
So.
he beat Shogun off, but yeah.
Again, the division sucks, so there's no getting around it. I don't know. I'm torn on this one because
I'm leaning toward Özdemir just because he does have knockout power, and I think he's probably a better boxer than Smith is.
Probably.
And I think he's I would say a slightly better grappler. Now,
I have no idea where the grappling advantage goes with these two. Neither of them are all that good at it.
I would probably favor Özdemir. But we'll see. I mean, look, Smith is a big, powerful dude.
Yeah.
He's 6'4". He's got a lot of mass, and he's gotten better. We can't overlook the fact that even light heavyweight. He's been in the game a long time, but he's only 30 years old. And we have seen guys who have struggled throughout their careers have bloomed sort of at this point. I would say Robbie Lawler was certainly one of them. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree.
And I'm not saying he's in like a Robbie Lawler like stage, but he has gotten better from his Strikeforce days. From being, because quite frankly, I think when Robbie Lawler was in Strikeforce, I wouldn't even have called him a top guy. He was a middle guy. He was a mid-level guy, losing a lot of fights. I think he probably could have won.
Yeah, falling asleep at press conferences.
Yep. I feel like he totally just let that. Who is that guy? He fought a light heavyweight fight in Strikeforce against what's his face? He used to fight in the UFC. Former Strikeforce, isn't it? Why am I just blanking on the name right now? Babalu. Hanato Sobral. Babalu.
Oh, yeah, he did fight Babalu.
And, I felt like that, he did. I felt like he could have won that fight. He did a lot of damage on Babalu. I feel like he could have won if he just did a little more. Smith is not that lackadaisical as I think Lawler sometimes gets, so. I think it's an interesting fight.
It is. I'm actually leaning a bit towards Smith for a pretty specific reason. I think he's going to have a rough first round, but I think he survives that, and I think as that fight goes on, he gets better while Özdemir doesn't. Özdemir is also really committed to his punches, and while that's very good in some respects, for some reason, I got this really odd visual of Özdemir misjudging the distance on a punch and Smith stepping in and cracking him with an elbow that just completely off-balances him. I don't know. I'm leaning towards Smith, but it's not a bad fight. That is the last time I'm going to say that about this card. Because the co-main event. Artem Lobov should not be in the UFC. All right? There's no two ways about that. He's there as a concession to Conor McGregor because McGregor is their big draw, and he likes
Didn't they say they were going to ban Artem Lobov after the bus incident?
They probably did. That was probably a thing that was said. And then they didn't. I mean, I don't know what to say. Again, I've said before on this show that Artem Lobov sucks.
But you want to know what? Johnson could lose this fight.
He could. I don't think he will, but he could. This was supposed to be Artem Lobov and Zubaira Tukhugov.
If you don't win this fight, you should retire, quite frankly. That's how bad it would be if he lost. And Johnson is capable of losing fights like this because he does that all the time. His record is 18-13, Robert. His record is not abysmal, but it's really not very good.
And while a lot of his losses are to top guys, there's a few in there that are to guys you kind of go, what?
Jonathan Brookins, Paul Sass. I mean, and Paul Sass, I think, was a little underrated, and I think he got cut prematurely. Let's see. Reza Madadi. Come on here.
Honestly, and I say this not as a knock on this fighter, but as a knock on the fight itself, but the Darren Elkins fight, Johnson should have won. But he was an idiot.
Submitted.
And again, that's not to say Elkins is bad.
That's on him. That's on him.
But
I feel like he doesn't have the highest cage IQ.
He really doesn't, especially after that first 3 minutes. That first round, Michael Johnson is a dangerous opponent. Basically everything after that, not so much.
Like he campaigned for a fight with Nate Diaz. He got that fight, and then he fought exactly the way Nate Diaz wants you to fight him.
Yep.
Basically.
And he's coming off of a terrible fight where he beat Andre Fili, but the fight sucked. I mean, I can't pick Artem Lobov to beat anyone who should be in the UFC, and Michael Johnson, much as I make fun of him from time to time, should be in the UFC based on merit, all things considered. So he should beat Artem Lobov, and I'm really
picking
hope he
Michael
does.
Johnson, but I fully believe he's capable. I believe Johnson sort of beats himself, and I believe he's fully capable of just having a brain fart in there and losing to Artem Lobov because it's Michael Johnson.
That is entirely possible.
I mean, before this,
in all seriousness, every time I've picked Michael Johnson, and I've picked him to win fights, but it's always with that reservation. I don't think I have ever confidently picked him to win a fight.
He's 2-5 in 7 fights. That's not even in the UFC. That's not very good.
No, and the only thing that kind of saved him was those last 3 losses he had were 2 of them were at lightweight against really tough opposition.
Right.
But when you struggle against Andre Fili, man, even
Darren Elkins has sort of been a bit of a journeyman, you know? I mean, Darren Elkins is he's good, he's tough, but he's never been like a top level. He's never been like of the elite class of his weight class.
And
the elite level.
Johnson put it on him in the first round and then gassed, faded, gave up his back, and got choked out in the second, which is how Michael Johnson tends to lose.
Serkinov. And man, I had such high expectations for Serkinov last year, and then
he was on such a good run.
Then he dashed what is it? Like what do you think happened?
Well, the loss to Oezdemir, I'm prepared to kind of just give him. Like, all right, you got caught with a surprise punch by a guy who's really heavy-handed and knows how to throw those types of punches. The Teixeira fight was just a bad performance from him. I mean, he was winning on the feet, and then kept trying to force grappling exchanges against a guy who's got more experience there. Gave up his back, got flattened out, and pounded out.
It's like he had a good run, and then he started facing some tougher... Well, I mean... Oezdemir at that time was still a fairly unknown commodity. I don't know. It's like he's. I want to believe he can win this because, like, Patrick Cummins, outside of his wrestling, is not good.
Even with his wrestling, like I'm of the opinion that even if you consider his wrestling, which is not bad, he
barely got by Jean Vellante.
He barely got by Jan Blachowicz before that. He was lucky that was a majority decision in his favor.
Right.
I mean, he got stopped by Little Nog in 2016.
I feel like they've kept Cummins around long enough, but I feel like if Serkinov can't figure out a way around Cummins, whose striking is terrible, and
I mean his wrestling. Here's the crazy thing about Cummins' wrestling.
Yeah.
It's not control-based. He has very little control over you. He's a worse version
he's not even that active on the ground.
No, he's a worse version of Colby Covington.
Uh-huh.
And I say that because if you watch Colby's wrestling, Colby doesn't actually have a tremendous amount of control. What he does is wear you down with constant mat returns. He
Right.
makes you fight to get up. He fights you, but when you get up, he gets you back down. You just have to rinse and repeat that. Vellante is that within that same basic school. He's just not as good at it.
I mean, I would not say Serkinov should be cut with a loss here, but like if you can't beat a guy like Cummins, like you might have to just send off.
I don't
Maybe
think
it's
he'll
time
be
to
cut
go to
with a loss,
LFA,
but he's done as a top contender with a loss for sure.
I mean, yeah. Well, he's not a top contender right now.
He's done as even like a potential contender. Like this is a real make or break fight for him. If he can't win this, he's just another body.
But it's Patrick Cummins, He should be able. Like to me, this is a fight he should be able to win.
Oh, absolutely, he should. I think he will, but this is kind of
Patrick
it for you.
Cummins is, to me, like Patrick Cummins is an enhancement talent, basically.
That's not unfair. And I mean, he's a gatekeeper in the sense that he's not all that good,
right?
But he presents a series of questions that you must be able to deal with to advance to the next level.
Right.
And I think Serkinov takes him, but
I hope he does, because I mean, I like Serkinov, and I just want him to. I want to see like those kind of flashes of brilliance. It's like it seemed he had earlier in his run.
Oh yeah, there's some real great things about his game, but he's really got to put it together.
Okay, so this next
Ukrainian? one. No, he's Canadian by way of. It says Russia, Latvia. That was it.
Okay, there you go. So this next one is a bantamweight fight.
Ugh. Yeah, we have Andrei Sukumtat, who was supposed to fight Gavin Tucker, which was a fight that I had very little interest in, but I wanted to see Gavin Tucker. Let me say it like this. Gavin Tucker's last fight was September of last year when he fought Rick Glenn, and was on the wrong end of a 10-7 round. I was somewhat curious to see how he rebounded from that absolute beating, because he got smashed.
So now he's fighting the debuting Jonathan Martinez.
Yeah, Tucker pulled out. Now we have this. Look, for my money, Andrei Sukumtat should have been fired for the Sean O'Malley performance.
Oh, that's right.
I mean, you had a guy literally on one leg, and you couldn't finish him. That is just such a profound level of stupidity you should not be fighting in the UFC.
Okay.
I mean, he's got one win in the UFC. Now, in fairness, I thought one of the Morales fight, I want to say, was a split decision that I thought he won. But he lost the Perez fight, beat Luke Sanders, lost the O'Malley fight, but again, like, that fight, just to me, the way he performed forever, just, no. Like, you're kind of dead to me. That said, I do expect him to win here because you got a newcomer on short notice. You tend to favor the guy who you're more familiar with, but if Sukumtat loses again, that will not surprise me. And if he loses again, get rid of him. I mean, I don't want to see him at all, but if you lose this one and you go 1-4 in your first 5 in the UFC, you shouldn't be there.
Wow. How do you like this next fight?
I don't.
Another light heavyweight extravaganza.
Three light heavyweight fights on the main card. They are trying to torture their audience. I mean, look, John Vellante sucks. I mean, sucks.
See, I'm fine with the idea of keeping a fighter on the card because he has exciting fights that the crowd enjoys.
That's true.
Vellante has not been having those fights.
I would argue ever. I know he's got a few fight of the nights under his belt. Fights of the night, rather. I didn't think any of the ones that he won for he should have won. Let me think. The O'Connell fight, maybe.
Corey
that was
Anderson.
Pretty nuts. The Anderson fight, no. The Safarov fight, no. Although that whole card sucked, so maybe that was just why we have to give it to somebody.
I mean,
look at in all seriousness, if you look at his overall UFC record, he's about, 500? He might have a losing record.
But his recent fights have not been good.
No, they've been awful.
Like I remember when they get to his fights, they keep talking him up that he's like this fan friendly, exciting fighter. But the fights have not, like, the Barroso fight was awful. The Alvey fight was
awful. I thought the Shogun fight was
awful.
awful. And the Alvey fight was awful. Yeah, he is 6-7 in the UFC. And he's fighting.
I don't know why they. Yeah. I don't know why they keep this. I mean,
the loser of
he
this
finds
fight
a way to
needs
win.
go.
He finds. It's not like he's winning and losing. He's like, he's only won 2 fights in a row in the UFC once, and then
No.
But then he's fighting Ed Herman.
Yes, Ed Herman, who is 1-3 in his last 4.
He was the tough 3 runner-up.
Yes.
To Kendall Grove.
And Ed Herman is coming off of a loss to CB Dalloway. You
and
lost to CB Dalloway. This fight should not be happening in the UFC. Neither of these guys should be there. I don't understand it.
Again, this is why you don't cut the likes, or not cut. This is why you don't let go of fighters like Phil Davis and Ryan Bader. Because maybe they're not the most exciting fighters, but they legitimize the division. And they give you more legitimate matchups than John Vellante versus Ed Herman, you know?
You know, if they instituted a policy, I have to look this up to be sure. I looked up the average age of the UFC light heavyweight division not too long ago, and it was shockingly bad. Like, I accept that the heavier divisions, you can have more longevity, so the average age of the top 15 of light heavyweight is going to be older than lightweight, featherweight, bantamweight, etc. That's fine.
Right.
But the average age was like 35. Average. You have like a couple of guys that
There's
are over.
Very little.
Pushing 40.
I mean, Dominic Reyes isn't even that young.
No, he's young by virtue of the division and by virtue of miles, because he's got less than 13.
But he's still,
fights,
I think, 30 years old, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Close
so we have very little in the way of, like, up and coming young blood in this division.
I mean, Dominic Reyes is what qualifies as up and coming.
Even Jimmy Manawa is he's pushing 40, is he not? If he's not there already.
He is over. I know he's over 30.
He's 38.
He's 30.
He's 38.
Yeah. I mean,
so
Daniel Cormier is 40, basically. Yeah, it's an old division, and that's a bad. And in this case, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
If you instituted a policy of cutting guys from that division who had losing records in their last, say, 3 fights and were over the age of 34, 35, you would lose like half the division.
Right.
It is a shockingly bad division. And I have to watch John Vellante and Ed Herman fight. There is no upside to this. None whatsoever.
Court McGee is still at it, huh?
Yeah, Court McGee is here to lose to Alex Garcia. Let's be very clear about this. Alex Garcia is not a great fighter, but he looks good. He hits really hard, and he fights out of TriStar. And Court McGee, much as I have an emotional attachment to him because I watched his first, 5 fights, professionally, his first 5 or 6 fights were all in a promotion that is local to my area.
Yeah.
And so I watched him when he was, I watched his first loss, the Jeremy Horn fight. And so I do have a bit of an emotional attachment to the guy. He's here to lose.
Kylo Ren.
He's here because he's hittable, and Alex Garcia hits really hard, and Alex Garcia is going to beat him. I'll be rooting for Court, but I expect him to be unconscious within the first 5 minutes.
I'm surprised they don't have more Canadians on this card. They have Serkinov and Do they have any other prominent Canadian? Wow.
Not on the main card. When we get to the prelims, there's a few.
Yeah.
But, I mean, again, you have Alex Garcia, who's kind of... Garcia's an adopted Canadian. He's Dominican, I seem to recall.
Okay.
Like he's been living and fighting out
You
in
would
the
think.
TriStar
You would
area.
think even if it's like not a big show, they would try to get some more prominent Canadian talent on here. I guess things being what they are,
or at least position them on the main card.
Yeah.
Because when we get to the prelims, all of a sudden, hey, look, it's. I'll go ahead and read these off because this is where most of our Canadians
I'd be
are.
fine if you put Nordine Taleb versus Strickland on the main card, honestly.
In fairness, it should be, but
especially over Vellante versus Ed Herman. Jeez.
Just cut the Vellante versus Herman fight altogether, and suddenly the card is like 30%. The quality of this card increases by like 30% if you get rid of that one fight.
And then you have Sarah Morris. She's on the prelims on the FS1.
Yeah. As for the rest of this card, again, you have Nordine Taleb and Sean Strickland, which is not. This is the other not bad fight. I mean, Taleb's coming off of that loss to Claudio Silva, which was rough, but Silva's also kind of a beast.
Taleb's pretty good.
Taleb is pretty good. I mean, his UFC losses are to Warley Alves, he just fell into that guillotine, Ponzinibbio, who's a top 15 guy, and then Silva, who is another.
And Strickland I think is also decent. Not like great. But
these are relatively underappreciated guys because they have key losses. I mean, again, you have Strickland, who's lost to Ponzinibbio, Usman, and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Those are tough losses, but those are also the types of losses that keep you from really breaking through, even if they're losses to really talented guys. I like Taleb in that fight. You have T-Belt Gowdy against Nasrat Hakparast. This one's going to fly under some people's radar. I don't like Gowdy. I don't think he's all that good.
To Sage Northcutt.
Dude lost to Sage Northcutt, man. And Hakparast had a really solid debut. Again, he's a very raw fighter, but his debut was solid. Calvin, he pronounces this Cutter, I seem to recall. You have Calvin Cutter. No, he's Qatar. Pretty sure it's Qatar.
Right.
I can't remember. I'll go with Qatar.
Versus someone named Fishgold? Chris Fishgold?
This is kind of a gimme for Qatar. Qatar is pretty good. Sarah Morris gets a tough fight, actually, in Toledo Bernardo, unless I'm confusing Bernardo with someone else.
Let's see.
Morris is pretty solid. Not great, but solid. And is, again, one of our Canadian contingent. I tend to think Morris will win this fight.
Bernardo 0-2. Seems like they're trying to give Morris a win here.
I'm confusing Bernardo with someone else, and I don't, for the life of me, know who, but I am.
Yeah.
Then on Fight Pass,
trying to give a win to the hometown girl.
Yeah.
Basically.
Then on Fight Pass, we have. I have no idea how to pronounce this guy's first name. Tjoven? God, I'm going with that. Tjoven Edwards and Don Madge. Why is this on the card? These guys are both making their UFC debuts. I imagine one of them is from Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. At least one of them is going to be local. This is not a good fight on paper. We have Arjun Buller, our other Indian. He's Indian, but he's lived in Canada he's Canadian. How does he do this? Because, yeah, he was born in Canada, but he very proudly represents his Indian. And this is India, the country, not First Nation. But yeah, he's very proud of his Indian heritage. Big star in India, actually. Unfortunately, he also kind of sucks. Because despite a really solid amateur wrestling background, and previously being undefeated, he lost via omoplata choke. Choke. God. Omoplata. If you're getting omoplated, I seriously doubt you should be in the UFC. That is not something that should be finished.
It was a tight omoplata, Robert.
You should never be put in one of those. Like, at best, it's a sweep. I mean, look, when it got to the point that he tapped, fine. By the time you got to that point, if you tap out rather than have your shoulder destroyed, fine. No issues with that. look, if you get put, if someone gets a Von Flu choke on you and you tap rather than go to sleep, fine. If you are not good enough to stop that from happening to you, I question whether or not you should be in the UFC. But they're giving him a relatively easy fight in Marcelo Golm, and I imagine he'll win. And then kicking everything off, we have Stevie Ray. That poor guy. I thought he was on the wrong end of a split decision with the in the Cage and Johnson fight. But Stevie Ray's another guy who doesn't get a lot of appreciation, but is good for a fight. As he fights Yesin Ayari. Ayari got beat by Darren Till. The Wallhead fight was a weird fight. I like Stevie Ray. I always tend to pick him because I think he's a pretty solid fighter, all things considered. But yeah, I am not looking forward to this card pretty much in general. So, Jeff, what do you like from the prelims? Anything you want to try and sell me on?
Nope.
It's not a very good card, guys. On paper, as always, the major qualifier here. On paper, in practice, we could have a great night of fights, and I really hope we do. I hate being wrong. I love being wrong about fight cards like this. Because I would rather be wrong and watch good fights than be right.
Once the broadcast, we still don't know how the broadcast switch, or I guess what the layout will look like once we get on the other side of that yet.
To ESPN?
Right.
No, we don't. That'll be fun. That's coming up.
ESPN and wait, is there's another network that's involved, right?
I don't think.
Or is it all?
Bearing in mind that that deal applies only to the United States, it's just ESPN and ESPN Plus.
Okay.
Which is their streaming service.
Okay. Yeah, conceivably they're going to be having fights on ESPN Plus and Fight Pass. So, plus we don't know how. We don't know how the ESPN deal will turn out. You know.
We don't. It's a lucrative deal.
Even right now, I feel like ESPN's MMA coverage is like minuscule at best. At best.
They've been pretty clearly trying to gear up to make it better, which is a good thing because they need to.
Do they even do Chael Sonnen and Ariel Helwani even have their own dedicated show on like one of the actual networks?
If you're talking one of the actual networks, I don't think so yet, but they also seem to be positioning.
Years back, you had MMA Live. Do you remember MMA Live?
I do.
And that was a good show. That was a quality show. That was finally like an ESPN quality network show that was delivered to the masses. It was digital only. Then they transitioned it to, I think it was on ESPN2 when they finally got it on TV. And then basically after UFC signed the Fox deal and John Anik left MMA Live and went to start working for the UFC, they basically cut it off. It didn't get canceled outright. It basically got phased out. ESPN still did MMA coverage from time to time, but it was never a heavily featured whatever.
I'm really curious to see how they're going to do that once this kicks in, or if they're going to.
I guess my skepticism or my concern is how are they really invested in the UFC, and do they really want to promote UFC? I'm not really sure. I need to see
how much they're paying for it. They should be.
We've seen deals like this get made, and then we've seen buyer's remorse, and we've seen them just fail utterly miserably.
Buyer's remorse is a thing. Management changes are a thing. If some of the people currently in charge of ESPN get phased out, and the people who come in feel differently about it.
WCW, even at its absolute worst, was still drawing fairly reasonable numbers for Turner Broadcasting. And they didn't want it there, and they got rid of it, you know?
Yep.
So, and Ted Turner always wanted wrestling on his networks, but then he didn't have power anymore. And then
Well,
they
I mean, what killed WCW was the Time Warner merger.
it wasn't just that. It was
not, okay. That is a slight oversimplification, but
yes,
that was what actually finished
the company
it.
going from making millions in profit to losing over 60 million in a year probably didn't help.
No, there were serious management issues as well. That's absolutely true.
So,
but yeah, the AOL Time Warner merger, which is one of the worst, that's like studied as one of the worst business mergers ever. By people who study that kind of stuff, it's so bad. But I agree. I think ESPN is using the UFC as a guinea pig product to see how they're going to be moving a lot of their stuff towards their digital platforms.
Right. Yeah, but they have to. But I mean, if you're going to be promoting, you have to have the product on your network. And that means SportsCenter, and that means going beyond like the Conor McGregor, Khabib stuff on SportsCenter or Ronda Rousey.
You're gonna have to talk a little bit about the average UFC card,
right? And MMA Live did that. And I was always disappointed when they got rid of MMA Live. It's because it never made sense to me. But whatever. Well, I just need to see it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I need to see it in order to believe it can happen first.
Yeah. Once we hit January, there's going to be some really interesting things to observe about how that transition happens.
A lot of news items we can talk about today. So what do you want to hit on first?
Let's start with 231.
231.
Because they announced the rematch between Jon Jones and Alexander Gustafsson for the vacant. It will be vacated by that point.
So
light heavyweight title.
Well, at least it's not for an interim title, but
yes. God, thank you. I don't think I could. Look,
are you fine with
really
this?
Solid card.
I mean, for the detractors of Jon Jones,
232, not 231.
For the detractors of Jon Jones, he's basically been. Is he being rewarded for his repeated acts of misbehavior?
I would say yes if we were talking about any other set of circumstances. By which I mean let's hang on. How do I say this? If Jon Jones fought in any other division, this would not be what was happening. But I mean, what else are you going to do from a practical standpoint?
I mean,
it sucks that this is.
I mean, it's not realistic that Cormier at this point is going to be jumping around divisions every month.
He's never coming back to 205. I mean, I know he made noise that he was, but no, man. That weight cut was a lot, and then you bulk up to go back to heavyweight and fight a guy like Stipe. No. Let it go, man. Let it go. You're not doing it. We all accept that you're not doing it.
Deserves it. I mean, he's tried to get this rematch for so long, and he was supposed to get this rematch in 2014. Then he got hurt, and then they made it into Cormier, and just circumstances. And then Gustafsson just had one setback or another. Mike Winklejohn says Jon Jones is looking good, but he is Jon Jones's coach.
Let me say this. I don't like the circumstances because, I mean, Jon coming off of all of his issues. You have Gustafsson who hasn't fought Jon fought more recently than Gustafsson.
Yeah.
Gustafsson's last fight was May of last year.
Right.
And, I mean, he shellacked Glover Teixeira, but
I would
That being
still probably pick John. All BS aside, I'd probably still pick John Jones, and then I would expect him to fail another drug test.
I don't expect him to fail a drug test. I expect him to get arrested partying the night after.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
again, like jokes aside,
He's a sociopath.
I am not.
People
I'm not qualified to make that distinction.
look.
More importantly, I don't know the guy anywhere close to well enough to make any sort of psychological.
People are not gonna. I won't be surprised.
That said, I love the fight. Their first fight is my favorite light heavyweight fight ever across any promotion. It's the best UFC light heavyweight title fight of all time. I am looking forward to the rematch. Much like you, I favor John, but that's a great fight.
I don't want to say
really
Gustafsson's a choke artist, but I just don't think he's got that special quality in him to go go that extra mile to take home that trophy. You know,
I don't think
he has it in him.
It also sucks that the two guys he's fought for the title are two of the best ever. I mean, you got John, who is probably the best mixed martial artist of all time,
right?
And Daniel Cormier, who is certainly one of the best mixed martial artists of all time as well. And it sucks for Gustafsson because he is a great fighter, but I kind of agree with you a little bit. There's something that doesn't quite... There's some kind of switch that he doesn't quite seem to have. And then you caught...
Because, I feel like even as tough as that first fight was, I feel like John Jones pulled that switch. And Gustafsson
he absolutely
Gustafsson just didn't.
And it also,
I felt the same way about the Cormier fight because he just started running away.
In fairness, I also thought he won the Cormier fight, but
yeah, but he actually had his back to Cormier and was just moving away, and
that's only bad from an aesthetic perspective if you have the distance managed properly.
Yeah,
and in fairness, given how bad judging is, that might have played a role. But, again, great fight, and UFC 232 is a pretty solid card.
You're not protecting yourself, and I mean that's bad.
Again, some of it depends on how far away you are from your opponent, where you are relative to them. If you're just trying to reset and that's the fastest way to do it, then I really don't care.
So, and then that will prospectively have Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes,
which is a really good fight.
Condit versus Chiesa.
Condit Chiesa is a really important fight for both guys.
Chiesa should win because Condit isn't interested in fighting anymore.
He should, but at the same time, Chiesa's... I don't know. I favor Chiesa in that
Chiesa's
fight.
Chiesa's going to win. Condit's wrestling is terrible. Chiesa's wrestling is terrible, and it's always been terrible.
Yeah, if Chiesa gets his hands together around Condit, it's probably over, because that's where Chiesa really excels, his body lock work. BJ Penn and Uriah Hall is on that card.
Oh, my God. Good Lord. Good Lord, why is this...
I'm going to laugh so hard if Ryan Hall taps out BJ Penn.
Oh, my God.
I mean, Ryan Hall gets a bad rap because his two UFC fights have not been aesthetically pleasing, but the man is a legitimately great jiu-jitsu practitioner.
What weight is this fight? What weight is this fight going to be, Robert?
Lightweight. That's what it's listed as. That bear in mind.
BJ Penn is not good off of his back, though.
That depends on what you mean. There are things off of his back that he does very well. There are others that he doesn't.
Look what Frankie Edgar did to him when he put him on his back. BJ had nothing.
Yeah,
he was powerless against GSP and Frankie Edgar. I can't recall the last time Penn looked in his element when he was put on the mat. Unless he was the guy who put his opponent there and he was on top.
The big thing that his guard work does is set up sweeps. And unfortunately, once people kind of clued into that, a lot of his efficacy started waning. But and again, Ryan Hall is a legitimately great jiu-jitsu practitioner, and I just want to see Hall tap out BJ Penn, because if BJ Penn is forced to submit, he might finally retire.
He's already retired multiple times.
I mean, in his own head, he might finally accept that I'm just done.
Do you really believe that?
No, but he might, and I'm hopeful. And in all honesty, at this point, my only interest in watching BJ Penn fight is seeing how badly he loses.
He's good, and then he's probably going to fight Oscar De La Hoya or Chuck Liddell.
Sure. Well, let's get him and Chuck and Tito in a three-way fight. Why not?
He'll fight Vitor Belfort for Golden Boy Promotions.
He'll go to Bellator and have the rematch with Lyoto Machida that we've all been waiting for.
He's lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he hasn't looked good in a single one of those fights. Not a single one.
Yep.
All right. He won the first round against Nick Diaz, which was in 2011.
Yep.
7 years ago.
7 years ago.
7 years ago.
He managed to win a single
round. He won a round against Nick Diaz. Okay. All right. He won.
And in fairness, he won a round against Dennis Seaver. Based off of a single kind of fluky punch.
I don't even give him.
I mean, if anything, that punch and what happened afterwards was a bigger indictment on his fighting ability than all of the losses. When he actually had a moment of success, he still couldn't capitalize on it against a guy like Dennis Seaver.
Absurd. Okay, so Brian Ortega is saying he will be fighting for the title at UFC 231 December with or without Max Holloway. He says he has an agreement where he will be definitely fighting for the title.
I hope he does.
I mean,
let me say this. I hope he does have that in writing, because
I'd be fine with that. It's unfortunate. I think we need a policy when champions are injured and they're not defending their belts.
We do. I agree. We need
a definitive policy.
We need a more consistent policy on this.
Because let's see, when did Holloway last defend his belt?
The Aldo rematch.
All right, so
it's been a while.
So this would be a year from the Aldo rematch.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm fine with the idea that if he doesn't make it to this fight, then he's not okay. Then that means he doesn't have a title fight lined up within a year, right? So, because it was a year since, because each time he's been scheduled to defend the belt, something happens.
He had they only scheduled. He only had the one, right? Because they scheduled the Ortega fight. No, they did the Ortega fight twice, didn't they? They tried.
Wasn't he supposed to fight Edgar once? At least once?
Yeah, it was Edgar. That fell out. Ortega beat Edgar.
And then Habib, which was more understandable, because
I mean, I do not hold that one at all against him. That would I mean, anyone who does hold that against Holloway is just like that. That's asinine.
But
look,
to me, if you don't have it done in a year, or it's scheduled within a year, strip him of the belt, and I'm fine with that. Because I think we need to stop taking these, just stop setting up these interim title fights just to have a belt, just to have a stupid belt that no one believes in, just to have one. So here's what was, we had Shevchenko, Jędrzejczyk for this card, Joanna, and they were going to fight for the vacant flyweight title.
That's still on the card. Hold
on. Then they announced a new main event for UFC 230.
Which we'll get to in a minute.
No, the original main event was Valentina versus Sijara Eubanks.
Yeah.
Versus Eubanks.
Then
they made another new main event for 230 after 229 happened. So this was before 229. It was Shevchenko versus Eubanks. And then Joanna threw a fit Joanna, who is like Dana White's biggest pal, who's never had a bad word to say about the UFC and Dana White, got really steamed. And then after UFC 229 and Derek Lewis winning the hearts of the nation with his balls was hot, and where's Ronda Rousey's fine ass at? Now we've rebooked this fight for two. What the hell is going on? This is like
the UFC.
This is
very
like musical
clearly,
chairs.
The UFC very clearly had thoughts for what they wanted for UFC 230's main event to be, and none of them worked out. And they have been scrambling for months to try and get that card a main event. So
I'm glad
in desperation
was rebooked, but like, come on here.
In desperation, they went to Shevchenko versus Eubanks. Everyone crapped all over that fight, and they should have.
That fight made no sense, and it didn't make any sense to destroy a fight that everyone wanted to see, like Shevchenko versus Joanna, and also hurting your relationship with Joanna just to book a women's flyweight title fight that no one wanted in the main event at Madison. It made no sense. Like, it's like...
Nah, it's the type of scenario you arrive at if there are at least two immutable facts that don't really line up.
But I mean, I feel like this didn't happen not even 10 years ago, like 5-6 years ago.
Well, they weren't operating on the mandate that every pay-per-view must have a title fight on it at the time.
You could have made Poirier versus Diaz the main event, and even though
didn't.
And well, right, but I think fans would have accepted that, and I don't think it would have done. I doubt it would have done worse than some of the cards they've had lately with a title fight main event. Robert,
it absolutely would not have. Look, I don't agree with that.
It makes no sense to me.
Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either, but that seems to be the marching orders by which they are operating.
All right. Well, look, now we have another vacant women's flyweight title, and it's Valentina versus Joanna again. So I'm glad that fight is back together. But ye gods, Robert, ye freaking gods.
Yeah, it's kind of a mess. Then we have
ye gods times 1,000.
Then we have UFC 230.
All right.
Which got its main event. Daniel Cormier, UFC light heavyweight and heavyweight champion.
Who said he was injured and had a broken hand.
Has a hand injury that he's going to fight through for the purposes
says he wasn't
of this card.
Says he wasn't going to be fighting for a while because of this broken hand.
I don't know what they gave
Derek
him to
Lewis,
do that,
who trains,
good on him.
Derek Lewis, who trains a total of 30 minutes for his fights, fighting for the heavyweight title.
It is a crying shame for certain segments of MMA fandom that we will never get to see Derek Lewis fight Tank Abbott.
Is this the right fight to make right now, Robert?
I mean, based on what criteria? Like,
heavyweight
isn't a good division.
I mean, look, Lewis has won his last 3. Yeah, he's has how many wins? He's 11-3, I think.
Yeah, he
has
a very good UFC record.
Let's see. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I think he's won every fight in the UFC except one by knockout, basically.
He had a couple of decisions.
I mean,
just
weren't
the one.
We talking?
The Ngannou fight went.
But I felt like we were
and
talking about after 229 that booking Lewis in a title fight was like the worst idea ever. Because
it is from a certain perspective, but he is pretty clearly, based on merit, the number one contender, based on wherever the rest of the division is.
Right, but
is he going to get? He's going to get
awkward.
He's going to get beat. He's going to get beat badly. Daniel Cormier is going to smash him.
I feel like
and then do that stupid pop. I want him to smash him and then do that stupid Popeyes chicken dance.
But Cormier is like coming in here on 4 weeks' notice with a bad hand.
Yep.
And Lewis is like, if Lewis is anything, he's remarkably resilient. and he's good at hanging in there.
I haven't even brought up the best part of this.
What?
I forgot. Following UFC 229, Derek Lewis is under medical suspension until...
Well, he said he was already cleared during
again, these all come with the provisions of you can clear them with a doctor's note, but he was initially suspended from competition until November 7th.
Right.
I mean, he's still on no contact training.
No,
apparently
not
the crap
anymore.
Out of him.
Apparently, if you believe Lewis, which, I understand if you don't, he's already been cleared. So he's no... Apparently, all those medical suspensions comes with that caveat. And apparently, Lewis has already been cleared. Is it... Now, look. To me, is it kind of shady that Lewis is fighting again on 4 weeks' notice? I mean, unquestionably. But, I mean, this is just sort of how crazy we are right now.
This is where poor forethought and management of circumstances have led us to. We're gonna get this fight.
I mean, I'd be fine. I don't know. I'm kind of speechless over this matchup.
I mean, look, Derek Lewis is gonna fight. He's gonna lose because. I mean, outside of lucky punch,
he should lose this fight because
he's got nothing for.
Unless, well, he has some things, but
he has a lucky punch, but if he doesn't land that,
and he's good
against the guy who beats him everywhere.
He's a tough fighter. He's good at. Look, Volkov had him on the ropes almost that entire fight, and he survived.
Sure. And Daniel Cormier is a significantly better fighter than Alexander Volkov.
Right. So, to me, Cormier should only lose if he does stupid garbage that we normally don't see him do.
And yeah, I mean, Daniel Cormier, for all doesn't do a whole lot of stupid stuff inside the cage. Apart from, I mean, he's got a couple of bad tendencies.
Lewis does not have the fight IQ of John Jones.
Or the athleticism of John Jones, or the.
He's athletic.
Sure, but he's also he's not John. And
no,
if you're not John Jones at this point, it doesn't seem like you beat Daniel Cormier.
I don't know. I guess my problem with this is that there's a bit of a sideshow quality to this title, even though Lewis is 11-3.
That is the weirdest thing about this, because I think you're right. This is the champion against the number one contender for the heavyweight title. And it still somehow manages to feel like
there was
kind of
a
sideshow.
time where I felt like Mark Hunt had a more legitimate claim to a title shot than Lewis.
That's probably true.
Where I would have been do you remember the whole rally for Mark Hunt? Do you remember that? At that time, I felt like Hunt had a more legitimate claim than Lewis does now. If that makes any sense.
In some ways, yes. The other downside to that was the division had another couple of contenders that Hunt had to deal with from a fan perspective. Right. Whereas right now, it's Derek Lewis. The only other argument you could maybe make is for Stipe, and I love Stipe, but you got knocked out in the first round, man.
And then Dustin Poirier got injured, or I don't know. For all I know, he could have failed a drug test.
He's based on everything that has been said, it's Poirier having a recurring hip issue that's really flared up, and he just couldn't deal with.
Poirier Diaz is off,
which really makes me sad because I was looking forward to that fight.
And Luke Rockhold is also hurt and is out of the rematch with Weidman.
On the plus side, we're supposed to be getting Weidman versus Jacare, which is a great fight.
He's going to destroy Weidman. Even an older, less polished Jacare, I feel, is going to eat Weidman alive. He's going to eat. And now David Branch is fighting Jared Cannonier.
Which is another not awful fight, all things considered. I mean, Jared Cannonier is crazy.
Yeah. But that's because of injuries. But
230 somehow managed to pull together a card that's actually moderately compelling.
I mean, I guess credit to Cormier doing this fight. I guess, I guess Cormier knows he doesn't have a lot of time left. He gets another. He would probably get
This will give
7
him two
figures.
relatively easy fights for pretty decent pay.
Well, he would easily probably get in the 7 figures here, but I think the other big attraction to taking this is getting the main event Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
In a title fight, you know? Those don't come along. I mean, those don't come along every day, you know? I think he's trying. I think he has the heavyweight title, but those, you can't deny, Robert, that the shadow of those Jones fights looms large over him. Even disregarding all the BS, all the, like, people believe he lost to Jones.
He did. Twice.
Yeah, but
cleanly.
No, on the record books he didn't. That's the thing.
He got knocked out.
No, he didn't. Those were the fight. Well, the first fight he didn't get knocked out.
No, the first fight he got dominated. The second fight he got knocked out.
Yeah, but then that result was overturned, and
sure,
he was
but
given
his brain cells didn't grow back.
All right, but he
got knocked out.
All right, but on the record books it says NC overturned. That's not a law.
It also says originally a KO win for Jones.
No, it doesn't.
It does.
So what? All right, but you don't.
So he got knocked out by a better fighter.
People believe he lost, even though the record books show otherwise. Okay?
Yeah, because he lost.
All right. Well, I mean, does Lance Armstrong still have his Tour de France titles? No, he doesn't.
No, but he won all the races.
Right, because he cheated.
Sort of.
All right.
I really, if we're that,
all right.
What kills me about that.
All right, he gets this fight. He gets the main event, Madison Square Garden. He defends the title, and then
he fights Brock Lesnar and rides off into the sunset with a multi-million-dollar payday.
Prospectively, because we know. Look how this fight turned out. So I can't in good conscience believe everything is going to go off that smoothly, because this fight literally came out of nowhere. So, I mean, I guess if you really wanted to give Lewis a shot, this is good a time as any, but the circumstances just seem questionable to me.
Look, again, the UFC's been scrambling for this card for at least a month, if not 2 or 3.
Lewis just fought where he almost got knocked out multiple times.
More than once.
I mean, you talk about losing brain cells and scrambling your brain. His brain was probably scrambled more than once in that fight with Volkov.
Oh yeah, and his body got torn to pieces. I mean,
this
is a very, very bad circumstance to be fighting in.
That just happened, and he's probably only training 30 minutes. I believe he's only training 30 minutes for his camp for a fight.
Yeah, it's
not hard to believe looking at Derek.
This is a really, really less than ideal set of circumstances for him, for everyone. But it's the fight they decided to go with.
We're celebrating Lewis balls being hot after beating Volkov. But you know what? Good for Lewis. He's getting a title shot. He can say he fought for the title, and you know what? All the fans are probably going to be rooting for him. Because his balls...
A lot of them will, yeah.
Because his balls was hot.
Hey, Derek Lewis is a funny guy.
But, you know, it's still bizarre. I am happy that Jacare is fighting Weidman. Sijara Eubanks is also she is still on this card, and now she's fighting Roxanne Modafferi. So, oh, you want to know? Derek Brunson versus Israel Adesanya. That is a good fight, too.
That's not a bad fight. Ruslan Magomedov is back for this fight, for this card, apparently. That's good. I like him.
Okay.
God, why's he been out for so long? Oh, you saw the
that was
suspension. Okay.
so that was the other. So those are the other major matchups. Anything you want to add on what's going on with the whole Habib McGregor Dana fallout? Or
Oh god. All right. So for those of you who don't know, now apparently, first of all, the Nevada State Athletic
oh
Commission
yeah,
further reviewed the footage of the
they're filing complaint against both. That's the right thing to do.
I agree, based on what I've seen.
Credit to Nevada on that.
So there will be something filed against McGregor. Not sure what's going to come of it, but both guys are being
probably a slap on the wrist at most.
They'll fine both of them 30% of their purses and probably just give them a small 6-month suspension.
Habib's not going to get stripped because McGregor, not necessarily an instigator, but McGregor had a part in this whole thing. He did have a part.
Yeah, Khabib then is now apparently threatening to just leave the UFC if they go through with...
Dan is like, we worked it out.
Yeah.
And now Dan is not going to ban his Dagestani buddies.
Yeah, Zubaira Tukhugov, who's actually not a bad featherweight fighter.
And look, that's not surprising. Dana pulled back on Artem Lobov too.
Artem Lobov, if Artem's still in the UFC, then a better fighter in Tukhugov for essentially the same thing should not be fired either. But.
And I'm not excusing what those guys did. And you know what? I'm not excusing Habib either. I'm disgusted with everyone. But I'm like, punish everybody. Punish all of them. You know? McGregor had a part in this as well.
Yep.
And quite frankly, strip Habib and give Tony Ferguson his damn title fight. You can't tell me Tony Ferguson doesn't deserve a shot at the title.
He does, and he has for some time.
And the UFC they're going to do this all over again, Robert. You know they are.
They will certainly try to.
The only outcome of this...
Look, UFC 229, since we're kind of talking about it, the buy rate for that is astronomical. It's over 2 million buys.
Right. The only outcome of this is a Habib-Conor rematch. That's because you want to know what? Not even the day after, people were already asking when's the rematch going to happen.
That's what happens with all of these.
And I feel like the point was proven.
I mean, I have no interest in a rematch. I think Khabib does the same thing.
Exactly. Khabib is one of the worst possible matchups for Conor. One of the worst you could do.
Probably the worst, all things considered.
All right, and everyone keeps talking about the fact that Conor won a round. All right, he won one round out of 4 where he was almost finished in the second, where he was grabbing the gloves and it makes no sense to book this rematch. It's like that time where they booked yet another Tito Ortiz-Ken Shamrock rematch, basically.
Look, the only reason to make an immediate rematch between Conor and Khabib is to make money off of it. And the UFC does have to make money.
Yeah. I don't like it.
Again,
are you going to honestly tell me Tony Ferguson doesn't deserve a title shot? Are you really going to say that?
I just said he does, and he has for at least a year.
What about Poirier?
We're not sure what's up with Poirier because he's getting a bunch of stem cell treatments for his hip injury. I mean, Poirier's out for a while getting that sorted out.
And McGregor and look, I feel like these incidents are not going to stop with McGregor. Keep in mind, Robert, that bus incident was just one in a building line of just embarrassing things for him after the Mayweather fight.
I mean, look, to kind of point out just how little interest I have in a rematch between Conor and Khabib, I would have more interest in some of the noise that Khabib was making about boxing Floyd Mayweather than I do Conor and Khabib fighting again. I genuinely have more interest in Khabib boxing Floyd Mayweather than I do Khabib fighting Conor in another MMA bout.
Maybe he will fight Mayweather. Who knows?
I hope he does. You know what?
Mayweather's
already
already
able
come
to make
out of
another multi-million-dollar payday off of
why did
fighting
Mayweather,
that guy
why
and getting beat
Mayweather
and
retire
losing.
every time when he, just
Look, Floyd Mayweather could make another, several $1 million beating another guy who's never boxed professionally. And Khabib could make a lot of money going in there and being beaten by Floyd Mayweather boxing. Like, if they want to do that, it's stupid. It has no athletic merit. Neither did Mayweather.
He
versus
should fight
McGregor.
Tony Ferguson.
He should. That's the fight I want.
Want to know why? Tony Ferguson has the best shot of anyone in the UFC of beating Khabib. And that's why that fight should happen.
I would absolutely agree with that.
And it's not Conor McGregor, just because he has a round over Khabib.
No,
Okay?
Conor has outside of a lucky, I hate to say lucky, because that diminishes the skill of all the participants.
You want to know what else? If Tony and Conor fought tomorrow, I would still pick Tony.
Conor has a better chance of beating Tony than he does beating Khabib, but I would favor Tony.
Yeah, he does, and I would still pick Tony.
No, I would pick Tony to beat Conor. But he gets hits. He gets hit.
Yeah. He's I mean...
Again,
yeah.
Again, I want to see that fight, and I still favor Tony, but I wouldn't be shocked at Conor clipping Tony and knocking him out. Because Tony, man, he lives on his chin a fair amount.
What a bizarre couple weeks.
It has.
But apparently Habib and Dana have worked things out, whatever.
I hope they have.
But that's why, Dana needs to filter himself a little more when these things happen. Just say no comment. We'll talk about it later. But you know what? It wasn't just him. It was Chael Sonnen and Ariel Helwani as well.
Stephen A. Smith. God, that guy. I hate that guy. He's really gotten on my nerves lately.
I mean, he's always on my nerves. Just the whole peanut gallery. It's almost like Michael Bisping was like the most balanced which is weird.
Yeah, when he's
like
the most
Bisping,
balanced.
Bisping is like the most balanced MMA commentator in MMA at this point, which is like bizarre. But my prediction right now is the UFC, as soon as they are able, the UFC is going to set up that rematch, and that's the only fight.
And it will do another.
It makes me sick. Yeah, because people want. That's what people want.
Yep.
They want the spectacle.
Hey, there's a reason Conor and Khabib did 2.4 million buys, and someone like Demetrius Johnson never even sniffed it.
It makes me sick. But that's just how it is. So,
people gave Venom a $400+ million takes to date worldwide, and that's why you're gonna get more crappy movies, guys.
Whatever.
This is what you support financially. This is the way the market's gonna move.
It's disappointing, but I don't want to see it. But that's what's gonna happen. That's what the UFC wants. That's what the UFC wants right now. I hope Ferguson gets something at some point though, because that's what I want to see. And Ferguson is a guy they should be promoting for all intents and purposes. And I don't think we can underestimate Conor McGregor's stupidity to do something else stupid again at some point.
Well, we'll see.
Because, quite frankly, the thing in like no one talks about it anymore, but the thing in Bellator was pretty messed up when you look at it.
Yeah, it was.
For a fighter who's not even a registered cornerman to like corner his teammate when he's not even
for
a
a fan in attendance, and that's all McGregor was for that event. Right? For a fan in attendance to jump in the cage, shove a referee,
accost a referee,
yeah,
and assault an employee as well, because he did. Maybe he didn't seriously hurt the employee, but to do that, it's messed up. Okay, and fighters have been fired and banned and blackballed by the UFC for less.
Hey, Jason High, after a questionable stoppage in a moment of passion and frustration, shoves a ref. Exiled.
And that wasn't okay. And that was not, it's not okay to do that. But should he have been fired? I don't know. The Paul Daly thing. I don't think it was wrong to fire Paul Daly at the time or give him a serious suspension. Roy Nelson, he got like a thing when he had his thing with
he did, yeah. One half-hearted kind of kick to the posterior of the ref for a late stoppage. Publicly castigated and suspended.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor, fan in attendance at an event, jumps a cage, shoves a referee, nothing.
Right. Because, I mean, then he's, like, taking the whole spot. Like, he's putting, like, what's bad about that is his friend is there fighting, and he's putting the spotlight on himself. And to me, that's just, like, that's just, I mean, to me, that's just disgusting. Because, you know, they're not there to see you, right? Because you're not fighting. And it's I guess the word I'm looking for is disrespectful. It's very disrespectful. And then to accost a referee and assault an employee for another organization who's a guy who's not doing anything bad. He's just trying to do his job because a maniac, a lunatic is jumping the cage and acting like an idiot, and you assault the guy. Okay? That's messed up, Robert. Is it not? And then,
it absolutely is.
And then the bus incident, the cynic in me almost says like the UFC. I can almost believe that whole thing was a setup at some point.
It was not a setup.
Just from the way everything has gone since then, I can almost I'm not saying I do, but I can almost believe it right now. Just with how everything has panned out.
I'll put it like this: if in 20 years it comes out the whole thing was a setup,
and you want to know what else? You want to know what sickens me the most? If it is in fact true that the Mac Life let McGregor and his entourage in,
well, that's documented.
All right, and the Mac Life is still credentialed for UFC events. When I have to claw and scratch my way to get an email back from the UFC, that makes me sick, Robert. Because I mean, what do I have to do?
I have an answer, but
am I not? Now look, I know I'm no Ariel Helwani, but you know my background and how I have professionally. You know that I've professionally conducted myself when I've covered this sport. Have I not?
To the best of my knowledge, absolutely.
And I have done everything the UFC has asked of me. And now this is a more personal thing on my end, but it really sickens me the fact that you have guys who are there on McGregor's dime, who basically it's his MMA news site, and they're there to cover the sport, and they let a group in that voluntarily assaults fighters and assaults property where they're not even allowed to be there, and they're still allowed to go to UFC events, and they're still allowed. That is a major. I mean, that's bad. I'm kind of holding myself back here, but that's pretty bad. Would you not agree?
I absolutely see your point. And
I have never violated the terms that were given to me by the UFC. I have never opened a door to let fighters in who willingly take part in want to, let's call it what it was. It was wanton violence. It was gang violence. That was gang violence, was it not?
that would not be an inaccurate descriptor.
All right. And why are they still giving credentials? And why are they still allowed into UFC events? It's sickening.
I mean, I can tell you.
And why does McGregor
sucks.
help? And why does McGregor help these people? Like, what do they get? What does the Mac Life do for McGregor that he needs to be connected to these guys?
He gets. I mean, look, if he's sponsoring them, he's getting a chunk of the revenue. And given his celebrity, I imagine that the Mac Life is a highly trafficked website.
Is that revenue even significant? Because, like, let me see. Let's look at their Twitter account.
I have no idea. I genuinely have no idea. But
Mac Life. So let's see. They have 67,000 followers. Which I guess is okay. I guess not bad.
That's not bad at all.
Compared to us, I guess that's not bad.
I mean, the answer at the end of the day as to why that group is still credentialed is they have a wider reach, they have a bigger audience.
All right, they have a bigger audience, but not as big of an audience of an MMA fighting. And to me, but Robert, to me, after you assist and take part in gang violence, to me, there's no going back from that. There's none. Even if they didn't know that was going to happen, you still get punished for something like that, right? And the fact that there was virtually no punishment there really makes me sick, because I'm making a strong campaign in case for myself right now to the UFC, and it might not even work. And these guys, just because of their association with McGregor, get carte blanche, and it makes me, the bile is in my throat. I got tons of bile in my throat right now, and it just makes me, it's in my craw, as Vince McMahon would say.
I don't think that's an unfair response. I really don't. They announced the main event for UFC on Fox. The last Fox card actually got its main event. We get a rematch between Kevin Lee and Ally Aquinta.
Not a bad
fight.
I like Kevin Lee, but can he really still make weight?
That is a pretty big question. I mean, Lee's only 26. Good heavens. I knew he was young. I didn't realize he was that young.
He's been consistently struggling with the weight cut. Consistently.
Yeah, that is a really tough cut for him. I mean, he missed weight for the Barboza fight.
He almost missed weight for the Kevin Lee fight, but he also had a really bad staph infection for that fight.
For the Ferguson fight, yeah.
Yeah, so I would normally favor Kevin Lee, but you know,
these two fought in 2014. I think it was Lee's UFC debut. Iaquinta won a decision. I favor Lee pretty heavily.
Yeah,
I mean, Iaquinta is kind of a one-trick pony, but it's a good fight. I mean, those two go to fight. The co-main event for that card actually is really great too. That's Barboza and Dan Hooker.
I like Dan Hooker.
That's got some violence potential right there. Dan Hooker's he's under the radar, but he's won his last 4 and he's finished all of them. Dan Hooker's kind of a monster, and Barboza is. I think we've seen Barboza's ceiling, but dude's not anyone to trifle with. That's a really good top 2 fights.
Yeah.
Rob Font, now Sergio Pettis moving back up to bantamweight. Because, flyweight's not going to be a thing in the near future.
Well, I don't think it's gonna fix Sergio's problems,
It's
honestly.
not.
But we'll see.
Most of his problems aren't size related, but he's fighting Rob Font. And that's a pretty good
That's
fight.
a winnable. It's a winnable fight for him, I think.
Yeah, that's a really solid fight. We'll see where both guys have kind of shaken out because Font's coming off of that loss to Austin Sao. But Rob Font has had some pretty good wins. I mean, the way he beat down Almeida, beat down Douglas Silva de Andrade. Rob Font can fight.
Fair enough.
So UFC on Fox 31 they're not going out with a whimper, at least on paper. They've put some effort into that. That's a pretty solid card.
You want to know something else that happened in the last week that kind of got me a little angry was that Ronda Rousey talked about Do you remember how when Ronda Rousey talked about the whole McGregor-Khabib thing, and she was like basically
Fighters
equal
shouldn't
treatment.
get preferential treatment.
Okay.
Considering
And then
that
people
your ego
attack.
was so fragile, you had to have your hand held going into
All right.
the Nunes fight.
All right. Hold on. To me, what she was talking about is different than not having to do media before a fight. I'm sorry.
Let me say it like this. Part of her point, when you actually get to her point, is very valid. It is a very valid point.
That's what she wasn't.
It's a bit borderline hypocritical for someone of her stature with what she had done to be
What
the
did
one
she
putting
do?
it out
What
there.
did she do? What did she do? Tell me what she did.
The way she conducted herself after the Holly Holm fight, the way she conducted herself leading up to the...
Okay, nothing. All right, nothing she did is a fraction.
Look, she didn't do anything criminal.
It was a fraction as bad as what happened with McGregor and Khabib.
She never did anything criminal. I'm certainly not trying to say
She
that
never-
they're on the same level. But
She never. All right, she acted like a crybaby. That's
she
the worst thing.
requested and benefited to whatever degree she did from preferential treatment.
So what?
So again, there's a bit of a lack of self-awareness for someone who has
She's talking about disciplinary action. She's not talking about getting red carpet treatment or whatever. It's different.
And again, for it to come from someone like her with her history, it shows a bit of a lack of self-awareness on her part. That doesn't mean she's wrong.
I disagree.
I'm not saying she's
She
wrong
has
necessarily.
She has every right. I mean, she did everything. She can say those things. She built women's MMA in the UFC. All right?
Sure.
And
I fail to see the relevance.
The relevance is that she is probably the most important female combat athlete in the last 100 years.
She's the most important female MMA fighter, certainly.
And other than that, she had, I guess, some minor public issues with the media. She has conducted herself like a professional, I would say. And she has never done a fraction of the things that we're dealing with now with Khabib and Conor.
I am not at all saying that they're of equivalency on either side of that.
Okay. I just don't think she said anything wrong, and I think people attacking her for that, like Luke Thomas, I don't think it's justified.
I think it's about as stupid as Steve Austin going into the current WWE locker room and saying, "What's wrong with you? I was making six figures and had to come up with my own gimmick." There is a singular lack of awareness about the totality of circumstance for what you're saying. Doesn't mean you're wrong.
What's the lack of awareness, though?
Does she not realize the degree to which she benefited from the same? Bear in mind, not to the same degree. These are not equivalent things. She requested and benefited from preferential treatment. And now that she's no longer in a position to do so, she's saying that you shouldn't do that. The crux of her argument is you should not treat people. You should not treat fighters differently depending on where they are in the card.
It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
It's not. No. If you get to the specifics, they're not equivalent. I'm not saying they are.
To me, disciplinary action is not the same thing as, as a tour rider or giving an extra level of comfort to a fighter coming into an event. It's not the same thing.
It is and it isn't.
All right, and here's what she never said. Okay. There has to be equal treatment. I feel like there has to be equal treatment all the way across. She's not talking about media obligations, Robert. She's talking about a totally different.
Fall under treatment.
Okay. Okay.
You are contractually obligated to do media, are you not?
All right. So, and if you work out something with the UFC where I don't want to talk to the media, or I only want to talk to such and such people before the fight. You think Conor didn't have that discussion before the Khabib fight?
I'm sure he did.
All right. So I mean, to me, that is not. It's a totally separate topic. It is, and you can't.
Preferential treatment is preferential treatment.
Robert, you are doing the same thing as Luke Thomas and MMA On Point. You're conflating two separate issues.
No, I'm very specifically drawing a line as far as
conflating.
If you want to talk about about the specific disciplinary action that should be taken, that is a different point from.
I think there needs to be equal discipline across the board, no matter what. Ronda did not do anything that was worthy of disciplinary action. Not one thing. Not one thing.
Okay.
Name one thing she did that was worthy.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
All right, so that's what she's talking about here.
Apart from potential breach of contract for a couple of media interviews, that's a whole other. That's specificity of contract law that I don't want to get into.
What? Because she tweeted about the Florida shootings or something?
No. Oh, no. Like, look, her personal opinions are her personal opinions. She's entitled to them. Whatever.
Okay. Well, this to me. All right. She's talking about punishments and disciplinary action, and to me, that's not the same thing as a high-profile fighter having to do less media or less interviews before a fight. It's not the same thing. Because quite frankly, a fighter doesn't owe us anything before a fight because their job is to fight.
That's rather interesting.
If it's in their contract, but if they set up a deal where they don't have to do that before a fight, that's up to them. Okay?
Sure. If you're going to have preferential treatment...
I held Nick Diaz accountable because it was his job to promote a fight with GSP and to go to that press conference, and the UFC, and he agreed to do it. And the UFC was trying to make it happen with him, and he kept running around.
Yeah.
In his own, he stepped out of like a birthday party for like his manager's family. He freaking bolted. Okay, that was that, and the UFC disciplined him for that. That was the right thing to do.
Sure, and Ronda hangs up on a conference call, and nothing happens to her.
Huh?
You remember that? You remember that issue?
I was on that conference.
Yeah, I know. So she hangs up. Nick Diaz no-shows a press conference. Ronda hangs up on a conference call because she got a question she didn't like, there's nothing that happens.
Look. I more than once fighters have no-show conference calls, and the UFC doesn't do a thing about it. That was about a reporter was asking her about her dating life with Travis Brown, which had nothing to do with the fight.
Yes, okay. About a public statement that was made by her It's a thing. Never.
By her boyfriend.
Yeah, he asked for a clarification
Who was
on
still, I think at the time was still technically married,
yeah,
and not
probably.
to her. But she was there to promote a fight, and that had nothing to do with the fight.
And my point is, she benefited from being treated differently from other fighters. And if
Right.
you're going to set up a circumstance by which fighters,
Well, she might have been internally disciplined for that. I don't know.
yeah, sure, and Conor lost a ton of money because of throwing a dolly at a bus.
That's not okay. That's not discipline. That's not company discipline. To me, I feel like if that's the worst thing you can name for Rousey, I feel like the argument is lost. If that's the worst thing.
Again, I'm not attempting to equate what she did with what Conor and Khabib have done.
That's exactly what you have done, and that's what MMA On Point has done, and Luke Thomas has done, and I have a big problem with it. I'm sorry.
The issue at hand is not, did Ronda do something of equivalent value to what Conor or Khabib have done? The issue at hand is, are you going to allow preferential treatment or not?
You don't, and
look,
I don't think.
Does Conor get preferential treatment? Sure, he does. I may not like it, but he does.
Right, and so does Khabib for that. Yes.
Yeah. Again, Khabib does too.
But she's also talking about failing drug tests too, which is valid. It's a valid point.
It's sort of a valid point. It's pseudo valid, but it's also not, because they've gone ahead and outsourced that to a bureaucracy that suspended a guy for 2. I mean, if we're going to talk about this, didn't they suspend somebody for 2 years for yeah? Oh no, I remember. Bradley Scott got suspended for 2 years for having cocaine metabolites in his system for his in-competition drug test.
Okay, what's wrong with that?
Nothing, but it's apparent. But they apparently think that fighting with cocaine metabolites in your system is equivalent to self-reporting a questionable dietary aid.
I mean, I'm not seeing a problem here.
I absolutely am. Fighting with something in your system like cocaine is not at all the same as going to USADA and saying, hey, I accidentally took something that has this thing in it that you say is on the list, and them saying, okay, 2 years. See you later.
I mean, this is what the fans and the media asked for.
It is, and that's part of the problem, is when you ask for stuff like this, congratulations, this is what it's going to look like.
All right, so that there you go.
I don't like it.
Let the deal run its course. Let the deal run its course. This is what you wanted for the sport. You wanted a clean sport. This is what it means to get a clean sport. So,
well, this is what it means to have the optics of a clean sport.
It's on you. It's on you. It's on you. Everyone who complained about TRT and no out of competition. And isn't it funny? Not long after USADA comes in, Tim Kennedy bolts from the sport. Tim Kennedy, who looks like freaking 1980s WWE superstars.
Hey, Tim Kennedy's jacked, that's true.
All right. Now look, Tim Kennedy never failed a drug test for anything, but isn't it a little ironic that one of the most vocal critics for the PED issue and the drug testing issue, after they have a program come in to be a watchdog for the sport, is nowhere to be found?
Not really. I mean, look at his, for a very specific reason.
To me, it's odd. To me, it's odd because to me, it's very odd considering the way he looked. Because the eye test is real. The eye test is real, and it is part of
crap.
It's real, and it's part of the criteria, whether you like it or not.
The fact that it's
Robert.
part of the criteria is also crap, by the way.
Well,
we're codifying the genetic differences.
You have the right to be wrong.
Yay.
You have the right to be wrong.
We have now codified into law, essentially, the genetic differences between people. Sorry. I think that sucks ass.
For years, Brock Lesnar touted, people thought it was genetics with Brock Lesnar. And you can stick your head.
Look, with Brock, a lot of it is.
I'm not.
And
yet now he looks like he's shrunk.
Yeah, it's also what, 7 years later? I mean, aging's a thing. And again, I'm not saying the man never did.
You don't shrink that much in that short amount of time.
I'm also not saying he never took anything. I mean, he did. There's not really a whole lot of dispute on this point by anyone with the rational part of their brain. Josh Barnett took a lot of stuff too.
Lesnar's body always looked questionable. It always did, and it's undeniable. And the minute he's actually in a random drug testing program, he fails. I'm sorry, but that's not. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence, Robert. I'm sorry. Overeem. Look at Alistair Overeem. People were saying about it for him for years, and the first time he gets a random test, he fails that test.
Partially, in fairness to Overeem, he also spent a lot of that time competing in a sport that has no provisions on drug testing.
It's baloney. I'm sorry.
He was fighting in K1.
It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence.
No, that's my point. Here's my point. If he's fighting in K1, K1 has no rules about drug testing.
He was fighting in Strikeforce 2 in the U.S.
Sure, and he never failed a drug test under them.
All right, but the minute he has his first out of competition test, when he's in his whole horse meat era, he fails that first test. I'm sorry, but that's not a coincidence. It's not.
I'm not saying the man never took anything. I'm saying the eye test is a profoundly unreliable test, and the fact that it's codified is a load of crap.
And yet, with Lesnar and Overeem, it was.
Sure, and
sorry,
look, would you ever look at Tim Sylvia or Josh Barnett and say they did steroids?
Sylvia.
Would you ever look at Hoist Gracie and say that's a roid head?
Sylvia, yes, because you want to know why not all steroids do the same thing.
Sure.
For guys,
you're actually invalidating your argument.
Guys that big, Umaga was on steroids too, and he was never like a jacked guy, but he was huge.
I mean, sure, but that's not actually the point. The point is, if you're going to codify something like the eye test, the reverse has to be true as well.
No, yeah, but I'm not saying it's absolute. I'm saying it's a test. It's not absolute, though.
So it's a fundamentally fallible test that has very little probative value, meaning it shouldn't actually be considered.
It has value in the case. It has, because look at those two cases.
You're cherry picking cases.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you did. You just picked two.
Look at Gleason Tebow. Look at Dennis Seaver. No one was surprised when those guys failed tests. No.
Seaver, I actually was. Tebow, not so much.
All right. Fair enough. This is where we fundamentally disagree.
I mean, look, I just think the eye test is a load of crap.
Okay. I think Russian collusion is a load of crap, but
no, that's documented. Sorry. Hang on. So I misheard you. No, the Russian collusion is a load of crap. There was no Russian collusion.
Well, here's my thing about like the Russia collusion thing. What is Russia suspected of doing?
I actually don't know. Like, that's never really been made clear.
Okay, they leaked what? They leaked files about what? Hillary Clinton?
I believe that's one of the complaints, yes.
Okay, but if they did that, what's actually being violated there? Like what?
I don't know. I mean, look, the whole Russian. I actually agree with you.
Here's what we do. We do know the Democratic National Committee colluded to sabotage Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
And this isn't collusion. We know that super delegates, even though Hawaii voted to make Bernie Sanders the and if I have a point there, like there's this, I don't know. I don't know how we got to this point, but
Right.
I'm just saying I'm
Moving
not
on.
like a Trumper thumper, but I feel like everyone's harping on this collusion thing just because they hate Trump.
I completely agree with that point. Like,
Okay, because to
I'm
me,
not
like
look. I'm
had
not a
all
big
the,
Trump fan either, but that's clearly
had
there's
all
clearly
these
nothing there.
stories, and we've had all this hysteria, and like nothing, and to me, no one can really accurately say what's been done here.
Huh,
I mean, to me, if Iran Contra was more of a gaffe for Reagan's presidency.
oh yeah.
And Reagan's presidency survived Iran Contra. As look, I'm not sure how accurate it was, but the Iran Contra thing was a real thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Y'all agree?
Unequivocally proven, documented.
All right, proven and documented, and yet Reagan's presidency survived that.
It did.
So, whatever. And like we have all these probes, we have all this stuff, but no one to me can accurately say what Russia and Trump did. And if they did something, like what did they do? Did they alter election results? Did they alter polling? Or I'm confused what exactly happened here.
If memory serves, the crux of the issue was supposed to be that whatever the Russians did unduly influenced how people were voting.
All right, now let me ask you. Let's say Russian hackers hacked into things and hacked files and leaked files. Let's say they hacked into files that were incriminating against Hillary. Is that illegal? Well, all right. No, wrong question. How is that is that collusion?
No, in order to prove collusion, you have to prove that the two parties deliberately acted together. In this instance, I imagine you just had... I imagine it was more that, the Russians wanted Trump to win. And Trump wanted to win. That doesn't mean they acted together. It means they had the same goal. That's
Okay.
not collusion.
But is it... If they leak things that were incriminating against Hillary, is that wrong?
I mean, wrong and illegal are two different things.
Illegal, maybe, but is it wrong?
Depends on. I mean, it depends on where you personally draw the line, because wrong tends to be on the subjective scale.
To me, it's wrong. What the Democratic Party did to Bernie Sanders was wrong.
Sure.
I think a superdelegate system that the Democrats use for their primaries is wrong.
Sure.
If the people, if you have a constituency if you have a body of people that vote, we want Bernie Sanders to get the presidential nominee, and then basically under the superdelegate system, and this is true, is it not, Robert? The superdelegate can vote against the will of the people, basically.
To the best of my knowledge. Not a member of the Democratic Party, so I'm not.
This is documented. To me, that's wrong.
The procedures by which they operate are all public.
Now look, maybe Bernie Sanders, even with that, maybe he still doesn't get the nomination, and maybe he doesn't even win the election. But I know for a fact, huh?
He wouldn't have beat Trump.
Maybe, but he should have won Hawaii.
At a minimum.
At a minimum, he should have won Hawaii. And to me, there is clear evidence of collusion against Bernie Sanders by the Democratic Party. And no one, and I guess my problem is that after the election, no one talked about that. That maybe for the good of the Democratic Party, no one is asking, hey, maybe we need a referendum on our primary system.
That's been discussed, but it's been quiet.
And you know who's discussed it? You know who discussed it? Joe Rogan had an actual Democratic elected official talking about this on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Hey, Joe will give a platform to anybody.
Exactly. But I feel like we're fixated on stuff that's just imaginary. And I'm sorry we've gone on this tangent, Robert, but Let me just end it with I want Khabib stripped of the belt and I want Tony Ferguson to get a title shot. How about that?
If that's how you choose to end it.
Okay, there we go.
I want Khabib to retain the title, maintain the title, and I want him to fight Tony Ferguson. That's literally all I want.
Never gonna happen.
Oh, I know it's not going to happen. That's what I want.
Not under Dana White's watch. He is frothing at the mouth for that rematch.
I never get what I want out of this sport. I've just come to accept it.
I used to, and that's the unfortunate thing.
I kept lowering my baseline for the sport to get over, and now I've got to a point where I get what I want on occasion.
All right, so moving on from that, I'll do my quick hits for this week. Check out my review of Daredevil Season 3. My exclusive interview with Wilson Bethel, who played Benjamin Poindexter. Basically the basis for Bullseye. So were you okay with the fact that they made this season sort of like Wilson Fisk is basically Trump? Was there stand-in for Trump this season?
I mean, sure.
Normally that bothers you with the other shows.
I mean, I think a bit of that was lazy, but I mean, that's also been Fisk's MO since before Trump was a public figure not a public figure, let me rephrase. Since before Trump was a political figure.
Right.
Fisk has had that same type of persona. I mean, if anything, Trump ripped off Fisk.
It wasn't inconsistent with the Wilson Fisk persona.
No, they didn't alter the character at all. They
did clearly lift some of the media hysteria and peppered it into the show, shall we say?
Oh yeah, they did. I mean, the same way that Luke Cage season 1 contained a bunch of references to Black Lives Matter. That would
got to be on his show. I mean, Vincent D'Onofrio makes that show for me. We know Iron Fist and Luke Cage are canceled, which Luke Cage was very surprising. So my only assumption here is that Disney's getting into the streaming game now, and I kind of feel like that the herd is being culled. Is kind of how it feels right now.
It's either that or they're repackaging Cage and Rand as heroes for hire instead of Luke Cage and Iron Fist individually. But
if they did that, they would have to do it on Netflix. But then Disney, but Marvel and Disney would have to have a say in that. So I don't know here's what we do know. We know Daredevil just finished. We know the numbers for the Defenders were disappointing. We know Jessica Jones is getting a 3rd season and Punisher is getting a 2nd season. Beyond that, we'll see. But Daredevil had a pretty good season 3, I think. So
my favorite of the 3 Daredevil seasons, quite honestly.
Season 2 was not quite as strong as the first season, so I'd probably agree. So check out my coverage of Daredevil season 3. Next up, I will be reviewing season 2 of Castlevania. And I know I'm going to be reviewing that Nutcracker movie, so I'm going to be seeing that.
I feel so bad for you about that.
It looks. I have no idea what's going on with that film.
I can loosely tell you.
Like, is it a sequel to the Nutcracker or a remake or like an adaptation?
It's an adaptation of the Nutcracker Suite
with
trying to make it for a more modern audience. So
like a
weird
feminist
imagery in action.
So I guess they're going more for a feminist angle with this, I guess, or
probably. I don't know. Probably.
It's just confused. Like I see the footage and I have no idea what's going on in that film, like at all.
No one does.
I
almost had to review that.
I'm curious. Did you see First Man?
I did not.
Like, I can kind of see why it didn't do well.
It's Oscar bait. And Oscar bait is either really, really good or really mediocre and very obviously Oscar bait.
I think the mistake was centering it all around Neil Armstrong. And because
the entire story is much more interesting than just the story of Neil Armstrong.
I think From Earth to the Moon was infinitely better. Remember that HBO miniseries?
Yeah.
Infinitely better.
I haven't seen First Man, so I'll take your word for it.
Apollo 13, infinitely better. The Right Stuff, one of my favorite movies, was infinitely better.
Oh, The Right Stuff's such a great movie.
All the other astronauts in the Apollo program they were given threadbare characterizations here, and that kind of disappointed me.
It's just, let's watch Ryan Gosling act. But
yeah,
eh.
and I can see why that's off-putting. In some of the cinematography on the ground, some of the cinematography was off. And I think, yeah. Now the controversy was that they took out the flag planting thing, which I understand. I don't think they handled that whole thing very well. The flag's in the movie, but I think people are upset that they didn't show the flag being planted into the moon, which,
I mean, it's
whatever.
One of the most iconic images of the last, century. Arguably man's greatest achievement certainly post 1940.
Right. But is it mankind or is it America?
Hey, we had a flag. We planted it.
And you want to know what? I was sort of confused because throughout the whole movie, Stanley Kubrick never showed up. Okay, so check out my review of that as well. And yeah. So also, I recently did I talk about the CM Punk interview?
You can talk about it again.
I interviewed CM Punk a while back, so you can still find that in the archives. That was quite exciting for me. So, but Wilson Bethel was an interesting character. I was not totally happy with his version of Bullseye. What did you think?
I don't have a whole lot of comparison. I don't read a lot of comics. A lot of my comic knowledge is osmotic. I absorb it from other people. Which is
so you like that they kind of had this kind of like psychopathic FBI agent who's really good at throwing stuff.
I was generally okay with it.
Okay.
I mean, again, my only other point of comparison for media that I have consumed regarding Bullseye is Colin Farrell.
Right. I like Colin Farrell's Bullseye, by the way. Even though
the movie sucked, but his Bullseye was appropriately fun.
I thought that movie is a bad movie, but I think like Colin Farrell, for whatever reason, his thing in that movie was the most fun I had in the whole 2003.
You weren't down for the wire fight between Jennifer Garner and Ben Affleck on the kids' teeter-totter? I'm shocked.
That was the worst. But without that, we may have never gotten Iron Man. So,
the paths we take.
So, exactly. It's all part of the bigger plan. So it kind of that led to Jon Favreau's association with Marvel and led to him directing Iron Man, which started the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that was equally significant. So, without the Spider-Man films, without the failures of the Spider-Man franchise, we would not have Spider-Man Homecoming or Tom Holland as Spider-Man either. So that's all, so, what goes around comes around in this case. So thank you, Robert. I had a lot of fun this week.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll see you next week then.
Looking forward to predicting Derek Lewis balls getting hot against Daniel Cormier. So thank you.
Daniel Cormier is going to squash his balls.
You would think. Thank you, guys.
That's what I want now. I want a nut shot from DC to Lewis. That's all I want. And then for him to make a joke about it.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll see you next week, Jeff. All right. As for myself, this Tuesday, Mark Radulich and I will be reviewing Halloween, the in-canon sequel to the Carpenter original. Halloween franchise is an interesting one, so Mark and I will be talking about that. I imagine Mark enjoyed it, but Mark's not a big horror guy, so who knows? I haven't seen it yet, but I will before reviewing it, obviously. Then I believe on Thursday, Mark and I are going to be reviewing Daredevil Season 3, which should be another interesting discussion. Mark and I get heated about these on occasion, because I get sick of musicals in my superhero shows, and he goes, shut up, because black people, which I believe is a direct quote from him at one point or another. So you can tune in for that. That should be a lot of fun. I really had a great time with Season 3 of Daredevil. I'm always hesitant about my initial response to things because I don't always land there permanently, but I binged the whole thing in 13 hours, give or take, and had no regrets. So, and then next week we will be back here to review Fight Night 138 and preview UFC 230. Whatever that card looks like by then. Because if history holds, it won't look like it does now. And of course, this Saturday you can find me in the MMA zone of 411 Mania to provide live coverage for Fight Night 138. That's going to be a long one, guys. That is not a good card on paper, as we talked about. That's it for me and Jeff. Thank you again very much for listening, for our meandering, and for your support. Lord knows I don't deserve it, but I'm thankful to have it. Stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.